Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to this virtual Bath Life Business Club, a very special one on hospitality in conjunction with Bath Bid and with Crumbs. I hope this all finds you as well as is reasonable to expect in these very tough circumstances. It's been 101 days since the first death from COVID-19 in the UK, 101 days in which our lives, our businesses, our thinking has been turned upside down, none more so than in the hospitality sector. It's been 50 days since lockdown. It's been 15 hours since the Prime Minister opined about what it might mean going forward for all our businesses, but particularly reference hospitality. There'll be a further 51 days as a minimum until July the 1st, when the first hospitality businesses may be permitted to open, subject to all of the caveats imaginable. We'll come on to all of this and more with our panelists. Please note that at the bottom of your screens is a little Q&A button. Please supply your questions through that, and we'll take those during this session. But before then, I just want to give you a few updates. We know that these are very bewildering times for all sorts of businesses. So we are launching a new series of Bath Life business surgeries. The first one is running this Friday at 10 a.m. It's in conjunction with Unividual, and our thanks to them. It's about financial planning, about how businesses are attempting to navigate the financial terrain in these exceptionally difficult circumstances. It'll be a combination of interview to delve into some of the deeper issues facing financial planning for our businesses, but also, of course, Q&A. Comms will go out on that this afternoon, so please look out for that. There's a companion piece in a week or so's time, which will be a business surgery about HR, about what HR and legal, what companies can and should be doing to provide as far as possible safety for their employees, but also what their legal obligations are, as well as from an employee's point of view, excuse me, what their rights are as well. So both areas are extremely important as we all attempt to get back to, I'm not going to use the word normal, but to get back to some form of business at some point during this year. A couple of other things, we're running a similar Bath Life, Bristol Life Business Club, which will run this Wednesday, broadly similar to the format that we've had in Bath so far. If you're trading in Bristol, if you're interested, please look out for that, 10 a.m. Wednesday morning. There's also a Bath Life, entirely different thing, a Bath Life wine tasting event, which we're running in conjunction with Stony Street this Wednesday at 7 p.m. All the tickets have gone, and £10 per head goes to the Bath Community Shop. It's another example of a hospitality business able to do something which benefits certain parts of our society, whether charities or otherwise. And again, that'll be a thread of this conversation as well. So onto this hospitality session. As mentioned, it's in conjunction with our good friends at the Bath Bid and with Crumbs magazine. It's very much a panel session, so we'll be asking our panelists to join us pretty shortly. They are, and you'll know, I'm sure many of them on this call will know many of you. Joe Cussens from the Bath Pub Company, the Marlborough, Checkers as Was, Hare and Hounds, Locksbrook, and a new venture in Moorland Road. Steph Welder, Good Day Cafe, and I have to say, exceptionally good brownies and cookies as well, so thank you for that. Marty Grant of Cokage, that's two Cokages, one in Walcott Street and the other in Chapel Row, of course, and there has been a wine delivery service, and we'll come on to that as an example of how hospitality businesses are finding some form, some route to business. Ian Taylor, a sort of serial entrepreneur in hospitality, initially perhaps in Bath, best known for the Abbey Hotel, but then number 15, the Bird Bath, Homer Park, and I've no doubt there'll be other things from Ian's fertile approach to business subsequently. And framing the whole discussion will be Kathryn Davis of Visit Bath, who holds a similar position also in Bristol, to give us the slightly bigger picture about the sector, but also how that fits with the larger play of Bath's economy, specifically around tourism. So Kathryn, if I may, if I could ask you to begin, let's talk about this. In a sense, this is the dumbest question we're all going to get today, but what has been the impact on Bath of no tourism and thereby exceptionally limited hospitality for the last 3 months and for the coming 3+ months? What's been the impact?
I mean, the impact is, first of all, in terms of the finances that come into the city from the visitor economy. And that's people who would be coming for day trips, that's people who would be travelling to stay overnight from within the UK or from overseas. If we look at the period from mid-March to the end of June as a starter, that's about £145 million that isn't in the local economy at the moment. So that gives you an indication of the value. And this is an economy that's worth just around £470 million in total. And obviously, the more that we creep into the summer and at reduced capacity, the more that's going to eat in. And at the same time as not having visitors, it's ensuring that the business community in Bath and the small and independent businesses that make up what makes Bath so unique and so different, we need to be able to protect them. And our role over the last few months has been about lobbying central government through our partnerships at Visit Britain. It's about trying to communicate what the opportunities are for grants and funding to the business community, and switching our whole marketing around from come and visit to more of a virtual presence.
Could you just pick up on that grant point? Very briefly, what specifically hospitality grants are available, and what has been the take-up like from Bath businesses? Is there more out there that people on this call perhaps should be applying for?
There is the hospitality grant that's been around for a few weeks now. I think there are still people who need to apply for it. I don't have the exact numbers, but we know that there are businesses who are entitled to it that can claim. There are the various loan schemes that are around if that's more suitable for your business. There's rate reductions, and also there's a new grant for those people who fall outside, details of which will be announced later this week, which is more around some of those B&Bs and sub-catering that fall outside of the grants that have been issued already. There's still some that are missing. There's still some support that's missing, and we continue to lobby for that.
Okay, and I'm sure details will be on your site, the Visit Bath site, but also the government sites. But please, for any of you, those listening as well, when you hear of interesting initiatives which may be relevant and of help to others, please put out on social media, hashtag Bath Together, and we'll retweet and help spread the word about whatever those initiatives might be. And I guess also, Kathryn, there's the bounce back loans as well for smaller businesses per se.
Absolutely. And a good point, we carry information on our site, but the Invest in Bath site has a summary of all the ways in which businesses in the Bath area can access directly. So that's another good place to start.
Very good. Okay, if I could bring in, I'll call you our practitioners, which probably isn't the right word, but our other panellists. Can you tell us about how these last 7 weeks have been for you, what you've been able to do and what you've ruled out doing? Perhaps I start with you, Marty. What's it been like for you these 50 days? Well,
like everyone, very, very surreal and strange. I'm not used to doing not very much. We obviously, as soon as the measures were announced, we put both businesses in full hibernation, we like to call it, rather than closure, but they're in hibernation. That took a while, because obviously a lot of fresh produce, which was outsourced to some of the staff and so on. And then we obviously put everyone through the furlough scheme. We've retained all our staff, all the kitchen staff and all the floor staff. Most of our staff are full-time employees, so that they should, at least they're getting something close to something they can get by on 80% of their wage, albeit without the trunk system, the tips and so on. And really, since then, we operated initially. We have an awful lot of wine stock. So initially, we for a few weeks I remained off furlough and did a local delivery system. Just people wanted wine, one of the things they do at home. Yeah. And we kept going. We put that on ice now, but we're going to relaunch that on an online, hopefully through an online sort of click and delivery system in the coming week or two.
Okay, thank you. And Steph, you've been doing some deliveries, but obviously not running the cafe. How has that been for your business? Has it materially added anything? Is it just nice to keep ticking over, build relationships?
It's a bit of both. So we've had obviously a big reduction, but then introduced a new part of the business, which has really taken off. So when this all started, obviously the same as Marty, we shut everything down, we wrapped it up and put all the staff on furlough. So we've got about 12 employees. And then, was kind of just sat at home really bored. And I said to my husband, oh, what if I sold some brownies and gave some money to charity? And he was like, oh yeah, maybe that would work. And I was meant to be subbed in to keep me out of the house 2 days a week. And we put some brownie boxes online where I deliver them to your house. And then suddenly it just really took off. So we post and hand deliver about 140 brownie boxes a week at the moment. It's about 25% of our regular revenue, but it's obviously not the same.
It's three things. It's inventive, it's extremely welcome for those who get them, but it's also, just to bring out this charity point, to date, how much have you raised? This is for Forever Friends and the Trussell Trust, the Food Bank Trust and so on?
Just over £2,000.
Brilliant. And it's a characteristic of the hospitality sector, but it's, that it can be and often is extremely thoughtful. So good for you for doing that. And I guess it keeps a degree of profile for you come the eventual time when you may be able to reopen. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it gives me something to do on Instagram.
Well, there's something. Can I bring in Joe and then Ian? What have you looked to do and what have you been able to do during this period?
Well, in the first few weeks for us, or days, were kind of crisis management, I suppose. Marty used the word surreal. It was bizarre how quickly this came upon us. We seemed to go in a very short period of time from looking forward to what was shaping up to be our best year ever to full-on, existential threat. Are we actually going to survive this? It was a very bizarre and scary time, and we spent the first few days, I guess, trying to get the staff onto the furlough scheme, getting all the various consents in place and so on. And then in line with that, there was also a lot of work on cash flow. That was the kind of the first thing really we went to, which we looked at just how much we can reduce our overhead, because our income stream was cut off overnight. And of course, all hospitality businesses work on the assumption that each week you're going to be bringing in a certain amount of revenue, and it disappeared completely overnight. And yet to actually cut off all of your costs correspondingly isn't as easy. So we spend a lot of time speaking to all our suppliers, all our people that are providing services to us, trying to rein in those services and cancel any goods or services we don't need, and try and hibernate the business. And along with that, then we would cash flow the forecast out and see, well, how long can we survive this kind of hibernation period, and what are we going to need for that? So that sort of tied in with putting together a loan application. So we applied for a CBILS loan with HSBC, which I'm happy to say they're approved. And at the time, I thought I'd been quite prudent and sort of far-sighted by planning out a 6-month period. But actually, as this has rolled on, I've come to realise that we're going to be in this for longer than that. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to have enough cash to survive this. What worries me is that we're going to come out of this at the other end with a very big debt burden that we're going to have to service for many years.
We'll come on to the other side in due course. And just to say, that civil loan scheme, I think, was in a sense what prompted this special hospitality session. It was Lawrence Beer at the Queensbury, who had I think probably one of the very first in the country to get that loan. In his case, I think the figure was 350 grand, which provides a degree of lifeline. But as you say, Joe, it's a debt to be repaid at some stage. Ian, have you been able to, in any way, to trade, to get revenue at all?
Yes, we have. I'm delighted to say at Homewood, one of the initiatives which is now in its 4th week is on a Saturday evening where we actually provide fish and chips for the local community. And we've been working with the RUH, and we hope by the end of June to have raised a figure close to 2,500 that we can donate. And I think that for us has been a great way of embracing the local community. And we're just about to start this week of providing takeaway Sunday lunch at Homewood. And then the following Sunday, it will be available at the Berg. And we've decided to work with Bath Festivals and the Holborn Museum and raise funds for both those for both of those sites as well. And I think it's not necessarily to make money, but it's at least to engage in community and to really build that as part of our brand. But for us, it has been a very busy time, because before lockdown started, we were engaged in 3 large projects, and we've continued to do those. And we've also looked at other opportunities within the business of doing work that would be really difficult and challenging to do when guests are about. So like, I've got a good, strong senior team. We meet on a weekly basis through Zoom, and we continue to look at all challenging ways of, how it's been a very interesting time to be quite reflective and to see how we would do things differently to what we have done in the past. And certainly one of the areas that we have been really ramping up is our marketing work, our digital marketing work. So we've been busy.
I mean, it clearly is a time for many of us, everyone in business, a period of sort of forced reflection about why we do what we do. And your points there about the community outreach, the partnerships as well. And that's one of the key elements, the key positives, or perhaps the only real positive of this whole event, is that there is a surfacing of decency in so many people and so many organisations, which is to be applauded, and one hopes is enduring. Let's come on to the whole concept of reopening. I'm sure pretty much everyone on this call would have tuned in at 7 o'clock last night to hear the Prime Minister say these phrases. And step 3, and there's so many caveats already before this part and subsequently, at the earliest by July, and subject to all these conditions, etc., we hope to reopen at least some of hospitality industry. So for our panelists, is this good news overall in that there is some form of pathway, an outline plan, or is it actually quite bad news because it's at least 51 days away? Please comment on those reopening plans and your own immediate thoughts about what you may be able to do. Joe,
I think it would quite. Can I start here, Greg?
Yeah, okay, do.
Yeah. My thought was, it was slightly, I think we all had expected that we might get a firmer date, like some hospitality. We're not sure what that means. And I think what we're waiting for is to see this document, the 50-page document, which is going to be available at 2 o'clock this afternoon. But I think the thing that still concerns me greatly is, if we had a date, would we have enough customers that actually, the lack of confidence is still a long way off. So I think the dates in July are at least something in the ground, but I think the reality is the confidence in people needs to move a lot more. I think I listened to something last week where it said like 60% of the people wouldn't feel comfortable of going to a restaurant or bar yet. So I think that's a big thing. And I think the other key challenge for us is just how we operate the social distancing as well. And I'd like to get some more information on that.
Yeah, I'll bring in the others on social distancing in a moment. But Kathryn, can you talk about that sense of confidence organisations such as yourself might be able to help bring to businesses, but really to consumers? You know, the world may feel different to us in a few weeks' time, but right now, the thought of sitting vaguely near someone, even 2 meters away, is pretty horrifying for many people.
Yes, and it's it's very much an individual doing that, and looking at researchers such as Ian said, and canvassing friends and family. It's a very mixed bag. There are those people who are desperate to get out and are desperate to travel, and particularly in our industry, to regain some sort of normality. And there are those for whom the concept is so alien at the moment, they can't even begin to comprehend. I think the interesting thing for us is making sure that when hospitality is allowed to open, and if businesses can open at a safe distance, that's going to be the challenge. There won't not everybody will be able to enforce social distancing in the way that we have now. And if you are going to bring people back into a destination of visitors, you have to have some retail offer, you have to have some hospitality, you have to have something for people to do. And it's going to be very, very careful management, because my understanding from talking to operators is nobody will be able to open at full capacity. So what does that capacity look like? And how does that translate into people getting here? We speak to other destinations across the UK almost on a weekly basis, and certainly those more locally, more frequently than that. And it's getting an understanding of what can be done, and we're all trying to learn from each other. But at the end of the day, it will come down to the individual businesses represented by some of the other people on this panel. Once they understand what they can do and how they can deliver, it's up to organisations like us to help them communicate it in the right and responsible manner.
Thanks. Joe, were you buoyed at the prospect that maybe, with all the caveats in the world, July 1st, you may be able to open at least some of your offerings?
Well, I think having that date, at least we've got some information. And I think before this, we had absolutely no idea, whether or not they were going to spring this on us and say, you can open up again in 2 weeks or 6 months. So it's better than what we had before. At least we can now plan for the next few weeks. And as Ian said, we're focusing on some of the jobs that we can do around the pubs that ordinarily you can't do because the staff or customers there. So we know we've got this period of time between now and then, but there's still a huge amount of unknowns. What the world will look like come July, what kind of restrictions will be put in place. But I think that the idea that we can trade profitably and viably with a hugely reduced capacity is just an absolute fantasy. It's just not going to happen unless there's something radical and fundamental that changes our cost base in terms of rent or VAT or wages and so on. Unless there's some sort of meaningful subsidy, it's just not going to work. I mean, the reason that Ian has a marketing department ordinarily is to try and drive customers in there and try and maximise the capacity and so on. And we're not a particularly fat margin business, even when we're running at 100% occupancy. So the idea that you can trade viably and profitably with 50% of your customers is a nonsense. And then you've got your back of house. I mean, for us, we've had Zoom conference calls with our guys thinking about what can we do when we reopen. And the customers is one thing, but then the staff is another. I mean, up at all of our kitchens, they're quite small spaces. They're not, say, like a big modern kitchen in, let's say, a hospital or a big kind of office block. These are often in 18th century buildings. We're all jam-packed in there. So how we're going to operate there is unclear. So there's a lot of unknowns. For us, I think that we are working on the assumption that sooner or later, we're going to be asked to reopen. We're going to have to reduce the capacity. So at that point, that's when we're going to consider takeaways and deliveries and so on. We thought about this when we first went into lockdown and thought it wasn't going to stack up for us. But when we come to reopen, we know that we're going to have probably capacity in the kitchen as long as you can solve the social distancing of the workforce there. But then we're going to have capacity that we can't serve inside the building. So at that point, we're thinking about doing deliveries and takeaways then. But there's a lot of unknowns. But I think we have to kind of constantly be looking at the problem and reacting to new information as it comes in. There's not much more you can do than that.
And your point about cramped spaces in the kitchens, give or take, is also true of most Bath cafes and restaurants. By the nature of the city, these are cramped spaces. So the occupancy you'll get in those sorts of restaurants will be lower than perhaps elsewhere, or certainly the larger chain restaurants and so on. Can I bring in...
If you're down at if you're down at Southgate, where you've got modern, 21st century kind of buildings with plants and areas there, they've probably got a better chance than any of our businesses where you're working in historic buildings.
Can I bring in Steph at this point? How do you regard the prospect of being able to trade potentially from September 1st, and what thinking are you starting to put in place about how you might trade then?
So yeah, we, as sort of like the cafe and coffee industry is a little bit different. Everyone's sort of operating different businesses here. We are thinking that there is not going to be a return. We couldn't return to normal service for all the reasons that Joe just said, like to return to our sit-in service as any kind of similar way to the way we were doing it before. We wouldn't have the capacity to make it sustainable. We wouldn't be able to seat enough people to keep ourselves afloat and to keep everyone employed. even if we were full up to that capacity at any point. So we are going to have to change quite a few things, and a lot of it's going to be to do with takeaway and delivery. And I think that's going to be the new sector. And our plan is to start our own delivery service, because the services that are available are quite expensive and they take advantage of smaller businesses and favour chains more than us. So we're kind of thinking about shifting everyone's jobs, because there's two main concerns for me, as well as sort of staying afloat and staying viable, is the safety of everyone who works here and everyone who visits us, and the security of their jobs. I want my fellow right now to feel pretty secure that when they come back, there's going to be work, and they're not going to come back for a week and then find that there's just not enough customers, not enough work for them to do. I feel pretty confident in the timeline, like the way he said the beginning of July. I thought that was what I was thinking anyway from the beginning, from when they laid out the furlough scheme. But I am also very concerned about what some hospitality means. Like who can open and what restrictions will be on everyone who opens. Will they come assess us individually? Like, will a Southgate Cafe Nero, for example, versus one that's in a historic building have different restrictions? Will it be, and will there be further support specifically for our industry? Because I think that's required. Like
I think on both your two questions, I think the answers broadly are no and then yes. So I suspect all businesses will be assessed regardless of provenance, ownership, shape of business, and so on. And there'll be, government people out there with tape measures, checking that you have the appropriate distancing and so on. In terms of grants, it has been signalled there will be further help to the hospitality sector. It is inevitable. We'll come on to the broader furlough point in a second. Can I bring in Marty? How do you regard the prospect of any form of trading in either of your two Cokages?
Good question. I mean, I thought last night's statement was one of sort of methodology. How are we going to get out of this lockdown? And it's good that we have some sort of train track now, and the train is on the tracks. However, social hospitality and social distancing are not conducive. They never will be. The reason people go to bars, pubs, restaurants, cafes, they want an ambience, they want a vibration, and that's a big proportion of the reason they're there. Obviously, good service, good food, and so on is the key as well. So I think we really, certainly at Cokage, we want to deal with practicalities and not. What I don't want to hear at 2:00 is more sound bites. I'm really over all these sound bites. I want practicalities, because that's how we can restart and rebuild and renew what we're doing. Certainly with regard to Walcott Street, for those of you who've been, it's a very cozy, intimate, narrow building. There's no way we could operate at all, I don't think, under the new guidelines. And with the Chapel Row side, just off Queen Square, yes, we have a garden and a terrace. We could recombobulate and have some capacity, but the capacity of 25%, perhaps 35%, we would never return to profitability at those levels. We would be running weekly, daily at a permanent loss. So obviously we need some kind of dovetailing of the COVID job retention scheme, along with further, as you said, Greg, hopefully some grants or some schemes to enable us to, because what they're talking about now is partial reopening in 8 to 12 weeks. And that's at least 8 to 12 weeks, by the way. There's a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes to caveat that. The reality, I think, could be very different. I mean, obviously, if you've got large beer gardens and so on, like Joe has a few, I know that could work, but he's still going to have many obstacles in his way to make anything close to a break-even position.
We've had one question here from our very frequent questioner, Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, saying that because of social distancing, the issues you've all been touching on, could restaurants open with more covers? Presumably not, but maybe longer opening hours. Are there longer days? Does the legislation allow for you to do that? Would that be welcome?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think any operator, one of the first things they'll be thinking about, which is, when you're in our business, you've got a physical amount of space and you've got a set number of hours. You have to try and somehow maximise your revenue within that space and with that time span. So you'll be looking at all these things. So yes, we've been thinking about Can we put in more service hours or more sittings? I suspect that customers will be willing to meet us halfway. I think that there is an enormous amount of goodwill towards pubs and restaurants. They want us to survive. So I think that I suspect that customers are going to be willing to embrace certain changes that perhaps beforehand they wouldn't have done. So yeah, I mean, clearly you'll be thinking about all these things. How can you possibly kind of maximise your opportunity in the space and time that you've got?
Just on the grants point, which was raised earlier, Adam Powell has dropped a note saying that figures published last week suggested that 927 eligible Baines-based businesses, easy for him to say, were still to receive small business grants and retail, hospitality and leisure grants worth 17.7 million. So there's money in the pipeline. It hasn't yet flowed through.
Can I just say on that point, this is probably my number one issue. What I've been working on at the moment is campaigning for us to have the right to have some of these grants that have been handed out. Because they're basically, if your business has a rateable value of less than 15,000, you get a 10 grand grant. If it's up to 51,000 in hospitality, you get a £25,000 grant per property. None of our pubs qualify for that. Every one of our businesses had ludicrous valuations last time round that went through the roof, and now we miss out on all of these grants. So over the last year, we've been paying, through the nose for our business rate, and now on top of that, we don't get the grants. So a little pub like the Checkers on River Street, with a rateable value of 59,000, gets nothing. You'll have pubs down in the centre of town, like the Saracen's Head, a Green King pub, which is right in the centre of town. That has a rateable value of £43,000. It's 4 times the size of the Checkers. It's getting £25,000. We're getting nothing. It's absolutely heartbreaking. When I'd done some work on this over the weekend, I was looking at the Marlborough Tavern's rates. Since we took over the Marlborough Tavern, our rateable value there has gone up by 498%. It's an absolute outrage, and we're losing this money, which is, it's nothing short of heartbreaking, because we're having to borrow more money, take on more debt that we have to give personal guarantees for, because we're missing out on all these. So I'm sorry that when anybody mentions these grants, I kind of tend to go off in a bit of a rant, so forgive me. But for us, it's heartbreaking. I've got down the road, I've got a local bike shop and a local takeaway. They are doing better business than they've ever done, and they've been given a 10 grand grant. I mean, how is that right?
It's very difficult to respond to that without immediately completely agreeing with you. But I just want to take that the slightly more general point about rateable value. Is this is something which you are specifically campaigning to Baines itself, or?
Well, I decided to put together some sort of presentation or video or something, because I had so many of these conversations. I thought I ought to alert people to it. I mean, we're challenging our rates, but this is the real kick in the teeth. Even if you are subsequently you win your appeal and you have your rateable value taken below the threshold that would have made you eligible for the grant, they're not then going to retrospectively give it to you. They said that it doesn't matter if you win your appeal, you've missed out, sorry. So, on many levels, it feels unfair. There is quite a campaign to try and get some of these caps removed, because they're a very blunt and crude measure of deserving cases. And clearly there are some big anomalies, and it's to do with the valuation system.
And we're continuing to lobby that point, Joe, and as our UK hospitality at a very high level.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a very good representative in Kate Nichols at UK Hospitality. I think she's been brilliant. And she's got very good relations with the Treasury and government. So I think she's absolutely the right person to be fighting for these cases. So fingers crossed. I mean, it would make I can't understate how big a difference it would make for our business. Transformative if we can get those grants.
I've got a related question. This is from Jane Campbell-Howard at Society. She's talking about potentially the rent deferral with landlords, which is welcome from a cash flow point of view, but all it's doing is storing up a subsequent problem. She wants to know, how is everyone dealing with that rent point? Are landlords being able to be supportive for you?
Can I speak on that? Yeah, on our 2 sites, one of our landlords, they're both private landlords. We don't have any council rents. One has, straight off the bat, within 12 hours, got back to my email at the start of all this and said, yeah, Marty, completely understand, 3 months rent free, which takes us up to the end of June. and we're due to have a conversation in the next week or two to see where we go from there. Our other landlord had some empathy, but you know, he's running. To him, it's a business. We're in negotiations with that. We have a respite period of a little bit of leave, but sooner or later, the probability is we will have to start paying rent again before we open, which obviously impacts on cash flow and business going forward. We don't want to be in a position where we finally are allowed to open and find out we're totally hamstrung on the cash flow front, which I'm sure everyone else feels the same way about.
Kathryn, can I bring you in on this? On the wider landlord point about rents, are you lobbying? Are you seeing any leeway with some of the larger landlords within this city and elsewhere?
It's not something that we've been approached by any of our members at this point. We've been focusing more on the grant schemes and the lobbying at national level. But if anyone's got anything they'd like to talk to us about, then please do get in touch.
Okay, got a question from Kerry-Ann here saying, would the panel support a shared or phased opening system, perhaps all cafes and bars opening on alternate dates, alternate shifts, mornings, evenings, in order to share the business around the city? Is there anything which is practicable in sharing that out, or is it so thin it's going to be, you know, you've got to do what's right for your business? I'll bring in Marty perhaps on this one.
I'm open to any suggestions that helps the city as a whole. Obviously, our primary concern is our own people, our own staff, and our own and keeping our own business afloat. But if there's a collective approach that works, and you mentioned earlier about flexibility in opening hours and so on, and what the offerings are through the day, and if we get that message out to the local people of Bath as a coherent message that they can assimilate and get on board with, then by all means, yeah. For example, we've never opened on Sundays apart from bank holidays, so you know we don't open Monday, Tuesday lunch, but we're open in the evening at the moment. Well, not at the moment, but on a day-to-day basis before this virus. So yeah.
Marty, I don't wish to be the spreader of fake news, but your colleague Richard Knighting has just noted that furlough extension has just been announced.
Oh, well, that's something, yeah.
Clearly, we'll all be over the detail of that very, very shortly. So we'll come back to that in a second. I've got another specific question. This is from Harry Tedstone saying about Bath Beard and helping movements through road markings for pedestrians. What about opening up the pavements for small cafes and restaurants to help with the capacity point, perhaps for a short period over the summer? But now, if ever, is the time for Baines to be more helpful. Would is anyone going to disagree with that?
I'm going to fully agree with it. Like, we would really benefit from some outside space. Us and a lot of our neighbours who basically have a little bit of pavement, if that. And, we've got to pay quite a lot for the licensing to have 3 garden tables outside, sort of where people are walking. So if we had the road on sort of the other side of the cafe available for tables, that would make a really, really big difference to us.
Ian, do you see any prospect of that being a slightly more liberal approach to pavement trading within Baines?
Yeah, I would like to think that there could be some movement. It's definitely a plus, and I think one of the things I was hoping for in the statement from Boris last night was probably that gardens could open up, because there was quite a bit in the press prior to that, and terraces and. But I think we are going to, certainly, if we are able to open in July, we definitely want to capitalise on the outdoor spaces, and to at least there, I think you have a fairly good chance of actually. So the more we can encourage with outdoor, the better for us all.
Well, I'd say with outdoor spaces is that they're not necessarily straightforward as perhaps some customers might think they are, insofar as we often have that problem here. We have people out on the terrace in the garden. As soon as it rains, everyone wants to come inside. So there are operational considerations that we're going to need to kind of work through. It sounds like a great idea when the sun's shining all day long, but actually quite often in this country we are not blessed with consistently fine weather. The weather comes in and out, and then you've got these customers coming in and out of the pubs as well. So they're not necessarily as the solutions that perhaps we might think they are.
Very quick update on that furloughing point. It's being reduced to 60%, so it's being tapered, which many have been arguing for some time. So there is a gradual, in the government phrase, weaning off of the furlough system. Clearly, much more detail. I'd like to come on to some, if not quite positive, but certainly some more novel areas of working, perhaps, or consequences. There is an argument that Bath, like other big tourist cities such as Venice, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and so on, has suffered from over-tourism. This is a point I'm seeing here. So is this forced, albeit that it's unwelcome, actually a roadmap for a more sustainable future? Can I bring in Kathryn on this one?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was reading a report earlier this morning about Barcelona, where the local resident population is saying, you've gone from over tourism and a phenomenal amount of over tourism to a ghost town. And so the opportunity that we keep talking about is about resetting. Now, this is a really complex issue because I don't think we'll see the travel industry back as we've had it. We're looking at the impact on coach tourism. We're looking at route networks. We're looking at how operators are working. So bearing in mind a lot of the travel trade, which is the B2B side of the industry, a lot of those people are on furlough, so it's difficult to have those conversations. I think from an over-tourism point of view, that concept is something that we have to consider when we reset and when we look at what the future Bath will look like. It's an interesting one, and one of the things we're working on, we will be working on, is a destination management plan that takes some of this into account. The challenge is that the city and the region has become very used to that tourist spend. Now, when it's not all there, what's there to supplement it? So it fires up questions as well.
Yeah, it might be a slightly old concept, the idea of over-tourism in exactly these current times where the streets are empty, but there is a wider point about what the nature of trading might be like on the other side. I just want to pick up to the point about Joe, your point, which you've made very eloquently and clearly about the rate threshold. Alison Herbert at Bath Bid, who are one of our partners on this event, she's making the point that Bath Bid is part of a national campaign called Raise the Bar, which is asking government to extend the grant from up to 51k to include businesses up to a threshold of 150k, and that specifically we raised in parliamentary questions today.
That's great news. Yeah, I'm aware of that one. I'm part of that campaign.
I'm sure you
unsurprisingly.
Unsurprisingly. I mean, and the wider audience, I mean, as ever, we shouldn't wish to raise any sort of false hopes, but it's quite clear there's a big anomaly that it's such a cliff edge. There is nothing if it's a pound over that. So at the very least, you would think it'd be smooth, if not extended. But who knows? I think every single government action, inevitably having taken one, you then look at the terrain from where you are outwards rather than from where you were when that decision was made, such as the furlough scheme, which is already, as we were discovering this morning, being extended and tapered in the way that we'd all hoped. Richard Spilsbury asked the question, can Baines increase the rates payable for vacant properties to encourage landlords to be more socially minded? It's an observation. Baines will say that they are under, and they are under horrendous cash constraints and planning constraints. But at the same time, there's such an anomaly. We've got empty property and we've got businesses which, if you could use that capacity in some way, it maybe increase your opportunity commercially. I just want to come back to this social distancing point, and there's a point from Lawrence Beer at the Queensbury. How do you, as hospitality people, expect to be able to serve people and maintain social distancing even if they're sat outside? How can you keep 2 meters away and put down hot food? I mean, how's that going to work? You can actually, have you attempted to wrestle with that?
Well, you can't.
Yeah.
It's a simple answer. You cannot do it. Sooner or later you're going to get within 2 meters. You can't operate within. You can't manage everybody inside your business and keep them all to, you've seen how difficult it is to do in supermarkets where they've got the arrows on the floor. People still come into contact. So the truth of the matter is you can't do it. So I think we're going to need to see some more nuanced guidelines about, you know, what is acceptable and what's not. Because I just can't see how you can do that. I can't see how you can serve people behind the bar. We've got people moving around. You know, they are about a metre deep, our bar. You can't get past people. And then you can't get up close to customers. So you can do things, you can improve, you can create an environment which is far safer than it was beforehand, but you can't adhere completely to the 2 metre rule.
Yeah, I know that bigger fish like Brewdog, you know, they will be encouraging the sort of order from the table policy, as it were. Obviously, that's easier to do in beer gardens and so forth, particularly if they're large. But as Joe said, yeah, it's just not conducive. Hospitality and 2 meters, they just don't. It's oil and water, quite literally.
It will require a tremendous amount of change. Like, I don't think we'll be serving people sitting down for a very long time until all of these the distancing restrictions are lessened.
I think one of the things we are looking at is the technology side, and as Marty has said about, like, whether it's an app of where the guest will actually be ordering it, and as opposed to a waiter or waitress taking the order. And I think the technology is something of the future, and what has happened, this may be a route forward. And I think it wouldn't be a bad thing for us, because labor is expensive, and if we can use technology to deliver it. And I think, you know, one has got to look at, when you check into a hotel, like the check-in process, if you can already be pre-registered and, you know, all you have to do is pick up a key, then you do have time, like, for the guests to spend more with. So I think, you know, it is a great opportunity for us to actually look at how we could use technology to overcome some of these issues.
Can I ask you to get out your crystal balls? And this is the most difficult question in many ways for all of us. What are your planning assumptions, both specifically for your businesses and what you expect in the sector for this Q4, this calendar Q4, compared with calendar Q4 2019? What are you expecting that ratio to be? Ian, you're smiling. You've obviously been spending a lot of time with your spreadsheet.
My wife has got a ball. What am I expecting? My biggest concern, like, you know, I do think in the Southwest we are really well positioned because we've had a low number, and we just really need to get that message out. But I am not expecting any great occupancies. I think, you know, we are going to be down 25-30%. Like, where our business at Homewood, where the wedding business, that has been a real challenge to manage that and move dates and whatnot. And I don't see any of that happening. I was going to ask Kathryn, what about the Christmas market? Is that going to happen this year? I can't see those things really materializing. So I think it is a low occupancy. It's looking, do we operate every day of the week, or do we just operate at the weekends? And then we're going to actually have to align the staff, and what are the different options with the people? Should we be advising people that, you know, if business doesn't pick up, then like, we are going to have to reduce the number of hours. So it is so much the unknown, and I think if we could feel that the level of confidence that people could want to start booking, because there is people who will definitely, but there's still a hell of a lot of people who are still very nervous about the whole situation. So very challenging for them. And that is the even more harder part. It's not this, but it's when we operate. This is when I think will be the real difficulty for a lot of people.
It's definitely hard, definitely very challenging. I just want to bring in the others. What are your working assumptions on your revenues or your trading in that Q4, vital Q4 period? Steph?
Well, I think Yeah, my plan is for any kind of soft like reopen, we won't be operating at anything like the capacity we were in 2019, which is very frustrating because we've been operating for less than 2 years, so we're a lot younger than a lot of the other people on this panel. And sort of this time last year was when we really started to pick it up, and it was all sort of gluing together. And I had really great expectations for this quarter and for the Easter holidays that have just gone. But yeah, I can't really see, even if Boris clicked his fingers and said, everyone get back to it, I can't see it being anything like it was last year.
And Joe, you were very eloquent in a very sad way earlier about this fantastic weather would otherwise be brilliant for your business particularly, but for most hospitality businesses. What are you expecting in Q4, like for like?
Well, I mean, Ian said it. There's just too many unknowns to have any kind of firm kind of plans. I mean, there's a great quote from Eisenhower which said, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." So that's kind of where we're at the moment. We've got no idea what we can come up with all sorts of plans. They're not going to translate into reality because there's too many unknowns at the moment. But that process of thinking through what we can do and what things are going to look like is vital. So I think it's just about survival and reacting to things as we get more information. What I do think though is that ultimately when we come out of this, we'll be okay. That people will come back out in some numbers, I think. And I thought it was interesting, Kathryn, you referenced one of the consumer confidence surveys, and I've seen quite a lot of these, and I don't actually think they're worth an awful lot right now because people are in the mindset of a lockdown, and they don't have the information to be able to make a real judgment about how they're going to feel about going out. I think when things ease up, and I think that when people get, when the health risks start to go on, which they will do eventually, there's going to be a great desire for people to come out and socialise. Because Marty's right, we don't sell food and drink, we create social environments, and that's what we're all about. That's why operating with social distancing is so difficult. But that's what we're all craving. People are craving to be together again and meet up with their grandparents and their family and have a meal down a pub and pint. So ultimately, we'll be okay. It's just how do we get there and how long with these huge unknowns that are hanging over us.
Thank you. And Marty, what does your Q4 look like with all the caveats that no one knows anything really at the moment?
Yeah, it's would I had a crystal ball, as you say. It's so nebulous, Greg. I don't want to be pessimistic, but if we can tread water, hold our own, I would take that at this stage. I think it's going to be self-policing. I don't, Ian mentioned earlier a figure of something like 60% of people wouldn't be comfortable coming to pubs and restaurants at this stage. I've read much higher, something like 78%, which only leaves 22% in Bath. It's really down to people to decide, and then they will, when they do come out, they will select venues more carefully, I think, based on spatial awareness, and obviously people will decide ultimately when we get back to something.
Don't say normal.
It could be 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to come to a slightly more positive way to end this discussion because we're nearly there now. It's a loaded observation, but we've heard it said that this lockdown is making everything more local. We are wandering our cities in a way that we haven't done previously. We're building friendships as far as we can through appropriate social distancing and so on, but actually reaching out to people. But in hospitality, arguably, there's a greater awareness of local businesses and local provenance in the whole, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Do you actually see there as a positive, potentially, at a mindset level for people wishing to support local in a way that they haven't done previously?
Yeah.
Anyone on this?
Yeah, I can say over the past few weeks, we've been operating a delivery service and a postal service for cakes and brownies. I didn't realise up until now how many people want to see us succeed and what support there is from locals for local. So yeah, I'd say it's really made people more aware of the fact that we may not be here one day if this gets bad, but I feel like we'll be fine at the end.
I think we've both realised how much we need each other, us and the customers and us. I mean, we use this expression, the customer is king and the customer pays your wages. We kind of sort of spread that around sometimes. But actually, this has really put that, highlighted that. Our income disappeared just like that. And these are only from our customers. We desperately need them. But as Steph said, I'm also picking up a great deal of goodwill from people. They want us to come through this. They want us to survive. And they're kind of rooting for it, which is great. It's a lovely feeling.
Ian, do you buy that argument? That
No, I very much support what everybody else has said. And I think, people are rooting for you and they do want. And I've just been amazed at just the success at Homewood of like those people, and they drop notes to say thank you and really appreciate what you're doing. So definitely I'm all for building and creating that much more local feel. And I think Bath is a great community, does a lot to support and encourage that.
Marty, I'm sure you're not going to demur on this.
No.
I'm going to open the point slightly differently, that we're all aware, and we've touched on two or three today, but aware of the hospitality sector rising to support the communities. I'll give you one example, then ask you each for your own other examples. We heard last week about the Bathwick Boatmen, that they pivoted as soon as lockdown happened to provide a takeaway service. It's defined as being a lifeline for local residents, but the really heartwarming part is that some of those residents have also been buying meals to deliver to needy elderly people isolated in their homes. That sort of experience is quite typical across Bath, and it's one of the reasons why we're doing this wine tasting thing. The idea that you can, do good by drinking and so on, and actually contribute to local charities. Can I ask each of you to talk about examples other than your own businesses that you've heard, some good practices out there by the hospitality sector? Maybe Steph, perhaps you start on this one.
Well, I've heard the Mint Room have donated countless meals to the RUH for NHS staff that are working obviously very hard right now. So I think that's excellent.
Brilliant. Joe?
I've seen an awful lot of stuff on social media. If you follow the Hospitality Union, the kind of campaigning group for our industry, they're constantly posting good news stories of cafes and restaurants and pubs that are doing their bits. I'm feeling slightly shamed here that we're not doing more when I hear some of these examples. We are trying to look out for our locals and regulars, so that we're checking in with those guys. And my managers are great. They've got regulars who come into the pub. Sometimes these are old boys who've got nowhere else to go, and now they're kind of checking in with them, getting them their shopping, making sure they're okay. So hopefully we're doing just a small bit to make the world a better place that way.
And Joe, you, like everyone else, if you see, and you're a particularly prodigious social media user, I know, but if you see good stuff out there, just spread the good word. We all need to be buoyed up by smart operators doing clever things, doing useful things in this world.
Sure.
Ian, have you got some thoughts on this?
It's a former colleague, Alan Gleeson, who runs the Harcourt Arms in Oxfordshire. Just amazed at how he has really developed the online or the takeaway service, and the success that he's having locally in building that business, which just opened at Christmas time, and keeping it going. But it's social media is really driving it. Done a great job.
And Marty, you got some?
There's so many, Greg. I mean, there are the businesses that impress me are the ones that actually have just adapted what they're already doing. Takeaway businesses. I mean, there's businesses in Larkhall like My Cuisine and Magali and Christoph down there who have a Meals on Wheels type service, but a lot of the local people I know in that area have been buying meals, like Steph said, buying meals for vulnerable residents and neighbours, and keeping them safe that way, which is commendable.
And Kathryn, across the sector, a key attribute is this ability and desire to do good. Is this something you've seen from your participating members and so on?
Oh, across every sector that we work with, and what's been great is to see how people are supporting each other. They're sharing those good news stories, whether it's donating balloon flights for NHS workers or every other people lending a hand and supporting getting food out to those who need it in schools. So it's been absolutely heartwarming to see the good that's come out of this awful time.
Well, that feels like an extremely good point on which to end this Bath Life Business Club. it is absolutely the case that even in the worst of times, people are giving of their best, particularly in hospitality. And we absolutely salute all of you in these incredibly difficult times. It's almost as though having a sense of purpose, even a sense of some degree of achievement, is helping people get through this. Even if it may not make much of a difference financially, in terms of doing good, maintaining relationships, building a brand, however one defines it, it's quite clear hospitality, I think, is leading the way in terms of being extremely decent and civic-minded. And we wish all of you the very, very best in these incredibly tough times. A few points in closing. Look out for our Bath Life Business Surgery this Friday coming, 10 a.m. with Univigil, and again, our thanks to them. The next Bath Life Business Club will be a similar format, panelists and exploring their sectors and so on, next Monday at 10 a.m. We do have that wine tasting thing, which should be good fun on Wednesday night. But our sincere thanks on behalf of all of you to our panelists today, to Steph, to Joe, to Kathryn, to Ian and Marty. Thanks also to the Bath Bid and to Crumbs magazine for the support today. And yes, of course, this is an incredibly tough time, but this too shall pass. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been the Bath Life Business Club. Thank you.